Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back. We're almost there. We're moving on to part 3 out of 4 on our Great Guitar Build Off series. Really excited. Almost done. This thing is coming along awesome. And next week, we're going to finish it up right in time for the deadline. And you guys can go ahead and start doing your bidding, start doing the raffle thing. Get started. Hope you guys like the build. Let me know what you think of it in the comment section below. And stay tuned for episode 4 next week, the final one. Let's go.
This episode is a pretty long one, but we've got a lot of ground to cover, so that's probably a good thing. We did the carving in the last episode and most of the sanding. In this one, we're going to be doing some finish sanding just by hand, getting everything cleaned up, and in particular getting some of these curves cleaned up a little bit because, well, they need it. This routing that I did around here, this is kind of, it's not signature. I mean, I'm not the only one who does it, but it's something that I really like to do, particularly in the cutaways on my guitars. And to clean that up, because I get a little bit of burning and stuff sometimes like I have here, I usually use a razor blade to start with, and then I go in with some sandpaper afterward to finish it off. So that's what I'm doing here. I've gone in with the razor blade mostly to get that cleaned up because I wanted to keep it as a straight edge. It is obviously a curve, but it's actually a flat curve like a chamfer because of the bit that I used. So got that cleaned up mostly with the razor blade and then finished it off with the sandpaper. It doesn't matter if there's a little bit of burning left in there because of the way that I'm doing the finish and what it's going to look like, but still want to get that cleaned up and make sure it's smooth. Burnt edges are usually a little bit more rough, so want to make sure that everything is ready for finish, nice and smoothed out. We're going to be doing a grain fill on this after we're done our sanding. I'm doing all of this at about 300% speed because, well, we've all spent lots of time sanding and probably quite a bit of time watching sanding, and it's only so interesting, right? So really what you need to know here before I move on is I go in with 220 grit for everything. The reason I'm using that is because I'm going to be doing a filler on it anyway. 220 is perfectly reasonable for most finishes that you would put on wood. 320 is good for kind of some of the finer stuff, and 400 is really starting to get into the high end of as fine as you would want to go. You don't want to go with 400 for a grain filler or for a stain or for anything like that. You would usually go 220 or 320. So that's what we're doing here, getting everything kind of cleaned up on a final basis. And then we're going to be sanding again once we're done our grain filler. So let's move on to that now. So what I'm using for this is a black Star Bond CA glue. You guys, if you've been following me, have seen a recent video where I showed a few really cool things that you can do with basically with this kind of glue in the guitar context. So in this particular one, I'm using the black one because I want to accent my grain, because I'm going to be doing, for the most part, a transparent finish. The black super glue is a very fast way to do this. It fills the grain nicely. It gives a nice hard fill that you don't have to worry about having a ton of shrinkage on or anything like that. It's just a really good option, and Starbond makes a good product. So if you are looking for their stuff, and if you want a discount, because why wouldn't you if you're looking for their stuff, I do have a code. It's going to be in the description below. It's a 15% discount. I believe the code's Angove15. So take a look at that, click the link, and go ahead and pick some up through there if you want. Now there is a caveat, I suppose, on this, something that is important to note from a comfort and safety perspective, because you can go ahead and tint, normal wood filler, normal grain filler, and get a similar effect. I prefer this because it's harder and everything and way, way faster. But you can do that and then give it lots of time to dry and sand it back and all of that. There's nothing wrong with using normal grain filler. The problem, if there is one with this super glue, is you basically need goggles. You need not just normal safety gear, safety like eyewear protection, but something to keep the fumes out, because otherwise it will burn your eyes. And I'm not saying it'll make you go blind or anything like that. I'm actually not that familiar with the safety aspects of it. I've certainly done it before to the point where my eyes, they were burning and I couldn't really see through them. And I can still see just fine, so that's just anecdotal. I don't know for sure, but it will hurt. It'll be like rubbing a partially cut onion on your eyeball. So make sure you've got something there to protect yourself. It's not a big deal if you're just doing a little bit, but if you're doing a whole guitar, which is what I did here, I did this entire guitar with this stuff, you definitely need some kind of protection. This is a lot of super glue going on there, and it gives off a lot of vapor. So you can see the process itself here is actually very easy, very fast. You just put it on there. I'm using a razor blade to kind of spread it around and push it into the grain. I'm using a shop towel to finish spreading it around and get into some of the curved areas where the razor blade really isn't appropriate. And that's about it. It's, it dries fast, it hardens fast, but not crazy fast. I've got lots of time to move it around here. This is at 400% speed. So it's on there wet for a while, easy to move around. And it's not going to set up immediately on its own. So you've got enough time to actually work with it. It comes in black, brown, clear. You can tint it yourself if you're careful. Basically whatever you want. Importantly, once you're ready for it to be set, you don't have to wait. You just use the accelerator. The accelerator makes it basically harden instantly. So very convenient, very quick. And with Starbond in particular, some super glues you can use an accelerator and it'll kind of turn it white. I don't remember the science, but it's mostly like the molecules don't align properly, so you can't really see through it anymore. Starbond's not like that. So when you use the clear one, it stays clear. When you use the black one, it stays black. Works out well. Pretty easy to sand back here too. Not as easy as a normal wood filler because it's a harder product, right? So it creates a harder fill, which I like, but it makes it ever so slightly more difficult to sand back. I don't have any problem with that personally. The grain in particular on this ash is deep enough that, if I need to do a little extra sanding and if I for some reason go into the wood a little bit more, it's not an issue. I've still got my nice grain accenting, and you'll be able to see that as I go through this sanding here. See, the black super glue has created a bit of a coating, but I'm not using it as a sealer on this one. I'm not using it as a clear coat. I'm just using it as a grain fill. So at this point, I'm going back and removing all of the excess and making sure that I just have it in the grain. Now I could use it as a sealer and clear coat after this, or even as just a sealer if I wanted to, but I'm not. That's not what I'm doing. I'm going to be moving on from this to the Oxford Supply paints. You guys know I really like the Oxford Supply lacquer, so that's what I'm going to be doing next. We're going to get this thing sealed up with some of their clear actually, sanding sealer, and then we'll move on to a tinted clear, and that's how I'm going to get the finish that I'm looking for here. So all in all, you can see this stuff cleans up pretty quick. It's pretty easy to work with. I am once again using 220 grit paper here, I believe. Maybe 320 grit, but I think it's 220, and it's coming off pretty fast. The excess, it's leaving what I need in the grain, and I've got my accenting. So we're going to end up with a nice, clean, accented ash finish here, with a closed grain this time, a sealed grain, as opposed to in the last ones where I've done, burning the grain to open it up and darken it, or sandblasting the grain to really open it up so I can do an accenting technique. This one we've got it accented and we've got it filled. So now we're going to have a nice smooth surface to finish with. You can see me, this is back at regular speed. That was how fast I was working on it. And it's looking good. Time to move on. So I finished off doing the sides and everything, of course, off camera, so you didn't have to watch me continue sanding because I think that was, enough sanding for now. And now I'm going in with an airbrush. I apologize here and for a lot of the remainder of this video. Because of my foolish camera positioning, my arm actually gets in the way. So I'll explain what I'm doing. You can kind of see what I'm doing, but it would be better if I were a little smarter and had picked a more logical camera angle. So sorry about that. So what I'm working with here is actually some waterborne automotive acrylic. And I'm doing it right over the grain-filled wood under the sealer. Doesn't really matter if you do it over or under. I just wanted it underneath so that I could just move on with the lacquer stages after this, including the sanding sealer. So I went in, again, waterborne, automotive acrylic. Doesn't really react to much. Pretty easy paint to use for this kind of thing and will work fine with my lacquer. And I'm using a Pache Talon, which is it comes in a set. It's like a starter set. Comes with several different nozzles and actually a little fan cap, which is what I'm using for this. It's a good option for it because, well, it coats stuff quicker. So I've gone around the edges, but not all the way around. As you'll see, I've done kind of the top. I've left the bottom transparent, and I've done a bit of a fade. I think it's a pretty cool effect. And then I've also filled in my swimming pool route there in the middle and turned that black. So now, once again, getting in the way of the camera frequently, I'm going in with my Oxford, and I'm going to use my paint gun for this, but just for the sealer stage, there was really no need. There's no reason to set that up. I mean, the paint gun's nice and all, it gets the job done a little bit quicker, but I was in the middle of a few other things, so I just use a spray can. Oxford makes very good spray cans. They spray really nicely, their nozzles are good, so there's no reason not to. So that's what I've done. I've gone in and added a few coats of the sanding sealer to get this thing sealed up and get a nice smooth finish, and that's getting the guitar ready for the next coats. If you're looking for the Oxford supply stuff, I do have a link in the description to that as well. Whereas the Star Bond involves a discount, the Oxford unfortunately does not. It's not an affiliate link or anything like that. It's just a really good product. So feel free to check that out on their website and let them know if you want, let them know that I sent you. That actually does help me out. Or you can also grab it through the Solo Music Gear link, and that is an affiliate link, so you're welcome to pick it up through there too if you want to help me out. And obviously if you actually want the product. So anyway, we're going to do 3 or 4 coats of this. I believe it ended up being 3 because that's usually sufficient. And this stuff is pretty high build, so you don't need, 5, 6 coats. A common mistake, and I've said this in many of my videos, but a common mistake is people go in and they just put an insane amount of paint on something, and then they wonder why, when they get to coat 16, they start having product failure issues. Well, the more paint you add, the more opportunity there is for something to go wrong. And if your layers are drying at different rates or something, you can get crackling and whatnot. So I usually recommend not using insane amounts of paint if you don't absolutely have to. I'm going in now and getting this sanded at 400 grit, getting it ready for the color. At this stage, I start going with the finer grit sandpapers. So 400 and 600 for this kind of thing, 800 before I go to the clear stage. That's kind of typical for me. So this one's 400. If you look at the side of the guitar, you can actually see, again, I've got it blacked out, but not all the way down. It fades, and along the bottom, it's going to be back to transparent. I thought that was a pretty cool effect. With the way that I've got the bevels and stuff like that, I thought having those blacked out would be neat, but having the bottom not blacked out would be cool, and yeah, that's what I chose to do. So now it's time for the color work, and for this we're actually using the just clear gloss from Oxford, and I've got a dye. It's actually a candy concentrate from House of Color. House of Color is a really well-known automotive paint brand. They do some really cool stuff, some really high-end show car type work, and these candy concentrates are designed to mix in their clears. They're polyurethane clears, but they also work really well in lacquer, as you're about to see, and I've done some tests on them before. I've actually done a few videos with them with different tints from them. So I got these concentrates from Coast Airbrush, which I think is a California-based company, but anyway, coastairbrush.com. They've got a variety. They got a nice selection of House of Color stuff. Picked up a few different tints. And for this guitar, as you saw there, I've decided to go with blue. I know, it's a shock. I did red the first year. I did kind of like a red rose gold thing last year. This year I'm going blue. Time to mix it up a bit. So we're spraying this. You'll see that this transparent color is like perfectly transparent. That's the idea of the candy concentrates. They have no pigment in them whatsoever. They're all dye, so the light goes right through them. And 2, as part of that, what you'll notice is obviously this only darkens, and it always darkens if you add more coats, but it actually darkens up pretty quick. So the first coat's going to seem very, very light, and by the time we get to coat number 3 and 4 type thing, you're going to get a pretty deep, robust blue, which is nice. I've mixed this up pretty strong. I know it probably doesn't seem that way just yet, but it's a pretty strong mix. There's a fair bit of tint in there, and the reason I've done that is twofold. 1, I want to make sure I don't have to put a ton of paint on there like I just said, and 2, I'm fairly confident in my spraying. If you're a little bit more concerned, the more tint you add, the quicker you try and build your color, and the stronger you try and build your color, the harder it is to do it. And by harder, I simply mean you need to be more careful, because With an opaque paint, if you have a little bit of inconsistency in your overlap, it's not a big deal. It all ends up being the same color because it's opaque. But with a transparent like this, every time you overlap, you end up darkening it. So if you are inconsistent in your overlaps, if your painting isn't, as robotic as possible, you're going to end up with streaks, kind of darker lines and lighter lines in your finish. And those will be accented. They'll be a lot more apparent if you're doing a stronger mix that has more of the dye in it. So I've avoided putting any streaks in my guitar. I'm happy with how it goes, you'll see. But I've got a stronger mix. If I hadn't been doing this for as long, if I were less confident, or if I were using, for example, a smaller gun with a worse fan pattern, then I would do a weaker mix. Once again, my arm is in the way consistently here, so I apologize for that. You can't really see my overlap that well, but I do end up moving on to a better camera angle at some point here. This is what happens when you film the job. You film all the footage and then try to edit it after. There isn't really a good opportunity to learn from your mistakes. So sorry about that, but you will see me in a moment here do a coat from a better angle. Unfortunately, it's going to be of clear coat, which is what I'm doing now, but still, you'll see it. Now, there's actually something important to learn here in this bit that I'm doing now. I'm mixing it very heavy with thinner. That second part was thinner, so it's about 70% thinner. What I did is I let that blue dry for a good week, and it's gloss, and I don't want to have to go and scuff it again because it's a transparent and that will leave streaks. It'll ruin it, basically. Luckily, it's a lacquer. So what I've done, instead of worrying about scuffing it, sanding it back to smooth it out, making sure we've got good adhesion and everything, I've just added a whole bunch of thinner for my first 2 or 3 coats here. And the reason I've done that is I want it to burn in. So I'm doing light coats, but with a lot of thinner in them. And I'm letting that next coat, that clear coat, burn into the blue underneath so I don't have to worry about streaking it up or anything like that. And that's kind of, if you're not waiting very long, lacquer will melt into itself. It's not a big deal. But if you're giving it a week or two, it's still not absolutely necessary to do it this way, but I find it prudent. And normally, if I were going between clear coats, I would just give it a quick sand. I'd go in with some 800 grit, smooth it out, get a little bit of mechanical adhesion to assist with the chemical adhesion. But didn't want to do that here, so I'm doing the heavy solvent spray instead and kind of doing a flow coat almost. Now, lacquer is designed to go on in thin coats, and so that's what I'm doing. You can see me moving pretty quick throughout this video, moving the gun quickly, not building up a lot of paint. And, if you start piling it on really heavy, what you end up with is risk of it cracking, shrinking, all that sort of stuff. Luckily, that's all pretty easy to avoid, and, people get a little crazy sometimes about their recoat times with lacquer. You get people who say things like, you can't put on more than 1 coat per day or whatever. I don't agree with that. I do a fair bit of work with nitrocellulose lacquer, and, I'll spray a couple coats basically immediately consecutively because of how fast it dries. But I won't do, 5-6 coats in a day and 5-6 coats the next day. I'll do a couple coats here, wait a few minutes, couple coats again, or wait an hour between or something like that, maybe 4 in a day, and then give it at least a day to dry, but ideally closer to a week. I don't rush through it. It's not a big deal. I mean, I don't usually have a job that needs to be completed that quickly, bearing in mind that this isn't my actual job. So give it a week and then come back. No problem. All right, so at this point, I've passed through the bulk of the explanation, the educational content, if you will. So we're going to move on. I'm going to put on some music basically in a moment here, and you guys can just watch me finish this up. I'm going to speed up a lot of the video footage. Next week will be the last video. We'll get this thing sanded, polished, assembled. Probably not tested next week, but we'll see. I've caught up basically in the filming to where I am, or in the posting to where I am in real life. So I've got to rush to get this done over the weekend because the deadline's coming up. But there are a lot of guitars in the invitational category this year. A lot of them, from what I've seen, look really cool so far. And there's going to be some exciting stuff coming out. So keep in mind, guys, this year, I'll share a link. But this year, there's going to be a raffle. So, you can bid on any guitar you want. You can bid on all of them. And keep in mind that all of the proceeds are going to charity. They're going to various charities, including the Great Guitar Build-Off charity that helps guitar builders who can't afford to get into this kind of thing. So please consider supporting every build that you are interested in and every build that you want, or that you like at least. And even, the charities. By bidding on the guitars, you're helping the charities. So you can pick by that as well. I know personally I'm going to try and get some raffle tickets for as many as I can. And that's my plan. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Right now you can see, for one last bit of educational stuff, so to speak, I'm sanding this thing very smooth. I'm actually using 1500 grit, I think, for this one. That's because I'm moving on to my next coat of clear. This hasn't been on there that long. And again, the next coat will burn into this coat because it's lacquer. So really what I want to do here is just get it smoothed out, take away some imperfections, a little bit of orange peel, that kind of stuff, and make sure that I've got a nice smooth surface to work on for my next set of coats. I'm only basically doing one more set, so I've done about 4 coats on the first day. I'll come back and do 3 probably on the second day, maybe 4, I can't really remember which, and that'll be that. Then I let this dry for as close to a month as I can before sanding back and polishing. So this weekend when I go in and sand and polish, it's going to be, I think, about a month since I did this. And we should be good to go. Try not to do it sooner than that, because if you do, you run the risk of the lacquer shrinking and cracking. So I think that's probably enough chatting. I'm going ahead and cleaning this, and we'll get a little bit more spraying done, and I will see you guys next week. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please feel free to give it a thumbs up. I would appreciate it. Remember to subscribe so you can see the next one. Hope you guys enjoy the contest this year, and I will see you next time. Have a good one.